You know, usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of precision.
Right, like engineering almost.
Yeah, exactly. You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points and says, there it is.
It's very binary. It's either broken or not broken.
Right.
And I think that's comforting because we, well, we like things to be visible and easily categorized.
But then you step into the world of corporate healthcare costs, and suddenly that x-ray machine is just totally broken.
Yeah, it's a mess.
We're looking at a diagnostic landscape for you, the listener, whether you're running a business or working at one, that is just entirely murky. I mean, you've got employers suffocating under 12, sometimes 15% annual renewal hikes.
Oh, at least. Sometimes higher.
Right. And you have employees who technically have health insurance, but they literally can't afford the, $4,000 deductible to actually use it.
Which means they effectively don't have insurance.
Exactly. And then you have CFOs just staring at the ledger, trying to figure out how to balance the budget without slashing the perks that keep their people from quitting.
It is the absolute definition of muddy waters. I mean, the pain is obvious to everyone in the room, but the source of the friction and, more importantly, the treatment, well, it just feels completely out of reach for most businesses today.
Which brings us to our mission for this deep dive. Today, we are looking at a structural mechanism, or at
Yeah.
least what looks like a loophole from the outside, frankly.
Sure, it often looks that way.
Right. It's this mechanism where a company called Benecor Health uses Section 125 cafeteria plans to redirect money that's, well, it's already sitting in an employer's payroll.
Yeah, money that's already moving through the system.
And the claim is that they can use this existing money to fund zero-cost healthcare access for employees, increase those employees' net take-home pay, and, somehow return net cash to the employer's operating account.
All while staying entirely within the established tax code.
Right. And I have to tell you, as the voice of the listener today, so representing the HR directors, the CFOs, the benefits brokers, and the actual W-2 employees listening to this, my immediate reaction is just extreme skepticism.
As it should be.
Yeah, I'm taking the side of the cynic today. Because in corporate finance, if it sounds like magic, it's usually fraud.
It's a very fair assumption.
When someone tells me I can increase my employees' paychecks, give them free virtual urgent care, and literally save the company money without writing a net new check, my brain immediately screams, is this too good to be true?
Of course.
What is the catch? So let's find out if the math actually holds up.
That is exactly the right posture to have.
Yeah.
I mean, in corporate finance and HR, skepticism isn't just healthy. It's a survival mechanism.
Right.
So my goal today is to kind of strip away the marketing, ignore the noise, and look exclusively at the math and the law. We need to synthesize the complexities of payroll tax, compliance, and benefits administration into plain English.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Because once you understand the mechanics of how this money is actually routed, the skepticism usually turns into a very different question, which is, why haven't we been doing this for the last 10 years?
Let's test that theory then. Let's start right at the foundation. We hear the term Section 125 Cafeteria Plan thrown around in HR seminars all the time.
Constantly.
But for those of us who don't read the Internal Revenue Code for fun, what exactly is it? And how long has it been hiding in the tax code?
Well, it hasn't been hiding at all, though I agree it's often massively underutilized. Congress created the Section 125 Cafeteria Plan back in 1978.
Wow, 1978.
Yeah. It is an IRS-authorized arrangement that basically allows W-2 employees to pay for certain qualified benefits using pre-tax dollars.
Okay, why 1978? What was happening then that made Congress suddenly care about this?
If you look at the economic climate of the late 1970s, you had massive stagflation.
Oh, right, the gas lines and all that.
Exactly. Inflation was soaring, the cost of living was skyrocketing, and traditional wage increases were either frozen or, functionally useless because inflation just ate them immediately.
Because if you had a raise, you just paid it back at the grocery store.
Right. And at the same time, healthcare costs were starting their steep upward climb. So Congress needed a pressure release valve. They wanted to incentivize employers to provide health and welfare benefits, and they realized the most efficient way to do that was to offer a structural tax advantage to both the employer and the employee.
Okay, break down the actual mechanics of pre-tax for me. We hear that phrase constantly, but what is physically happening in the payroll system when an employee elects a pre-tax benefit?
Sure. So imagine an employee earns a gross pay of, say, $2,000 in a biweekly pay period.
Okay.
Under a normal post-tax scenario, The government looks at that full $2,000 and calculates federal income tax, Social Security, and Medicare based on that entire gross amount.
So they tax the entire pie.
Exactly. They take their slice from the biggest possible pie. But with a Section 125 plan, the employee elects to redirect a portion of their gross pay, let's say $200, to pay for qualified health benefits.
Right.
The payroll system takes that $200 and subtracts it from the gross pay before any taxes are calculated.
Ah, so the employee's taxable wage base shrinks.
Down to $1,800, yes.
Yep.
So now federal withholding, Social Security, and Medicare are all calculated on that smaller number.
Wow.
The government basically pretends that $200 never existed for the purpose of assessing those payroll taxes.
I follow the arithmetic there. But here is where my corporate skepticism flares up again.
Bring it on.
If this has been around since 1978, and it's basically found money generated by a lower taxable wage base, why isn't every single payroll provider in the country already doing this automatically?
That's the logical next question.
I mean, if I use a major payroll company, why isn't this just a toggle switch I flip on their dashboard?
That is the most common hurdle businesses face. The reason it isn't an automatic toggle switch in your payroll software comes down to a fundamental separation of functions and, frankly, liabilities.
Liabilities?
Yeah. Payroll providers are experts at running pay cycles, calculating withholding, printing checks, and moving money to the IRS. They are not licensed to act as legal fiduciaries or compliance administrators.
Meaning what, practically? Are there actual laws preventing them from doing it?
Meaning, to legally run a Section 125 plan, you run headfirst into a massive web of compliance. You must have a written plan document drafted by qualified legal counsel.
Oh, so it's not just checking a box.
Not at all. You must maintain a summary plan description, or SPD, and distribute it to employees. You have to capture, date, and securely store salary reduction agreements for every single participating employee before a single dime moves.
Okay, that sounds like a lot of paperwork.
It is. And crucially, you have to run annual non-discrimination testing to prove to the IRS that the plan doesn't unfairly favor highly compensated executives.
Oh, I see. So the payroll software can do the math. They can subtract the $200 easily enough, but they can't provide the legal framework that makes that arithmetic lawful.
That's the crux of it. A payroll company's license and liability model just does not cover drafting legal plan documents or running IRS non-discrimination tests. They are the calculator, not the lawyer.
The calculator, not the lawyer. That makes perfect sense.
Right. The tax code allows this incredible efficiency, but most companies never set it up correctly because they lack the operational expertise to connect the tax code, the payroll system, and the benefits delivery at scale.
So you have this massive gap between what the law technically allows and what an employer's HR department can actually administer without, running afoul of the IRS.
And that gap is the entire premise of Benecor Health.
Yeah.
They act as the administrator to bridge that chasm.
So they do the legal side.
They provide the legal framework, the compliance testing, and the benefit delivery. Once all of that is legally sound, they just integrate the final deduction codes back into the employer's existing payroll system.
Oh, so I don't have to change payroll providers.
No, not at all. They aren't replacing the payroll provider. They're doing the heavy lifting, so the payroll provider's calculator is legally protected. They make the statute work exactly as Congress intended.
Okay, my CFO brain is very intrigued now. If it's not a loophole, and it's built entirely on establishing a lower taxable wage base with the proper legal documentation, how does the math actually shake out for the employer?
Let's talk about the math.
Because the claim is that the employer saves money. Where does that cash actually come from?
It comes from the exact same mechanism, the lowered taxable wage base. We need to talk about the 7.65% rule.
Oh, the FICA tax burden. Every business owner listening knows that pain intimately. Walk me through it.
Whenever an employer pays a W-2 employee, the employer is legally obligated to match the employee's FICA taxes.
Right.
That means the employer pays 6.2% for Social Security and 1.45% for Medicare out of their own pocket. Combined, that is 7.65% on top of the employee's gross wages.
It's the silent tax of doing business.
Exactly. Well, under Section 125, every single dollar an employee redirects pre-tax removes that dollar from the employer's FICA calculation base.
Wait, really?
Yes. So if an employee elects a certain amount for their benefits, the employer saves 7.65 cents on every single one of those redirected dollars.
But that sounds incredibly small on a per dollar basis. 7 cents. What does that actually look like in aggregate when we scale it up across a whole company?
It scales incredibly fast.
Yeah.
On average, across various wage bands and benefit elections in a properly structured plan, this FICA recapture averages $91.43 per enrolled employee per month.
$91 per employee per month, just from avoiding that 7.65% match.
Just from the FICA recapture. Let's scale that up.
Let's do it.
For a 100-employee company, assuming typical participation, $91.43 per employee per month translates to roughly $109,716 returned to the operating account annually.
Over 100 grand.
And the beauty of this is that the money isn't some year-end rebate you have to beg the IRS for. It is realized in real time.
How so? Like, how does the cash actually hit the account?
Through reduced quarterly 941 FICA deposits.
Oh.
When your payroll runs, your required tax deposit to the government is simply smaller. The cash never leaves your company's bank account in the first place.
Okay, wait. I also saw a note when I was looking into this about workers' compensation. Does a lower wage base affect that too?
Oh, it's a massive secondary benefit that often gets overlooked. In most states, workers' compensation premiums are calculated directly based on the taxable W-2 wage base.
Right, because it's based on payroll.
Exactly. Because the Section 125 plan lowers that taxable wage base, the basis for the workers' comp premium drops correspondingly. Depending on the state and the specific risk class of the policy, employers can see their workers' comp premiums drop by 30 to 50% on the enrolled payroll fraction.
Okay, hold on. Nothing is free. You're telling me a 100-person company saves 100 grand a year on FICA plus workers' comp savings. But I'm looking at this as a cynical CFO. What does the administrator charge to set this up? If I have 1,000 employees and Benecor charges some massive per-head fee, am I just trading a tax payment to the IRS for a giant invoice to a vendor? Walk me through how handing an administrator a check is a win for my ledger.
That is the most important question a CFO can ask. To answer it, we have to look at the cost structure. Whenever you look at a Section 125 plan, there are 4 cost buckets. Cheap vendors will only quote you 1 bucket, but there are always 4.
Okay, what are the 4 buckets?
First, plan document setup, so drafting the initial legal framework. Second, plan administration, which is the ongoing payroll integration and election capture.
Got it.
Third, annual compliance. That's the non-discrimination testing and amending the plan for new IRS limits every year. And fourth, integrated benefits and member services. The actual healthcare access, the telehealth, the multilingual support.
So what is the fee for all 4 of those buckets combined? Because that sounds expensive.
Benecor charges a flat $35 per enrolled employee per month. That's it.
Wait, $35 a head. Let me do the mental math here. If I have 1,000 employees, you're asking me for $420,000 a year in administrative fees.
Yes.
You just told me this saves money. How is adding a near $500,000 line item to my budget a net positive?
Because you're looking at the fee in a vacuum, but you have to look at the ledger holistically.
Okay.
That $35 fee is not paid out of your operating cash. It is paid entirely out of the FICA savings you just recaptured.
Ah. Okay, let me map this out. The savings average is $91.43 per employee per month, and the fee is $35.
Exactly. You take $91.43 in FICA savings, you subtract the $35 administrative fee, and the employer is left with a net positive of roughly $56 to $101 per employee per month, depending on their exact election amounts.
Oh, wow.
Even with 1,000 employees, you are generating over $1 million in FICA savings, paying the $420,000 fee out of that newly unlocked cash, and pocketing over $600,000 in pure net revenue.
So the break-even point isn't in year 2 or year 3 after some long amortization schedule?
Break-even happens on payroll cycle number 1. The business is literally cash flow positive from the first day the plan runs, because the reduction in the FICA tax deposit is significantly greater than the administrative fee.
Let's apply this to a real-world scenario. Let's take a small business for our listeners, say a 25-employee manufacturing company.
Okay.
It's fourth quarter renewal season, and their health insurance broker just walked into the conference room and handed them a 10% rate hike on their major medical plan. What usually happens, and how does this change the game?
Well, a 10% premium increase for a 25-employee group usually equates to roughly a $22,000 hike for the year. Normally, the CFO has 3 terrible choices. They have to eat that cost and lower company profit. They have to pass the cost to the employees by jacking up their paycheck deductions, or they have to slash the coverage, maybe raise the deductible from $2,000 to $5,000 to buy the premium down.
The classic downward spiral of corporate healthcare. We've all seen it.
Right. But let's apply the Section 125 FICA recapture to that exact room. For 25 people, the annual net FICA recapture after paying the $35 admin fee is roughly $27,429.
Wait, the recapture is over $27,000 and the premium hike was only $22,000.
That's the power of the math. The Section 125 implementation entirely absorbs the premium hike. The company doesn't have to change insurance carriers, they don't have to degrade the network or raise the deductibles, and they actually have about $5,000 left over in net positive cash flow to put back into the business.
That is wild. If we connect this to the bigger picture, my CFO brain is extremely happy. I'm saving 100 grand or I'm funding my renewal.
Yep.
But if I walk onto the warehouse floor tomorrow or into the nursing station and I tell my employees I just saved the company money by tweaking their payroll deductions, they are going to think I am pickpocketing them.
Absolutely.
How do you explain the math to the worker? Because if the employer's saving all this money, isn't it coming at the employee's expense?
That is the most common and, frankly, the most valid fear an employee has. But the employee math is just as compelling as the employer math, and it relies on the exact same mechanism.
Okay, show me.
The employee's gross pay does not change. But because their taxable wages drop, their federal withholding drops, their FICA contribution, their own 7.65% share that they pay out of their check, that drops too.
Because they pay half of FICA, right?
Exactly. And in most states, their state and local taxes drop as well. Because all those tax burdens shrink simultaneously, the W-2 employee actually sees a larger net paycheck.
I need a specific example. Talk to me about the forklift driver or the administrative assistant making, say, $15 an hour.
Let's look at an employee earning $31,200 a year. When they participate in the plan, their taxable wage base drops. Now, they are paying for benefits, so money is moving around on the ledger. But even after accounting for the pre-tax deductions and any post-tax wellness rewards within the plan design, that worker takes home an average of $71.96 more per month than they did before the plan was implemented.
Net positive in their bank account, not theoretical money.
Yes, net positive cash that clears their checking account every single month.
So it's like finding a forgotten $70 in your winter coat, but it happens every single month.
Pretty much.
But you mentioned benefits. What are they actually buying with this pre-tax deduction? Are these phantom benefits, or do they actually get something tangible for participating?
This is where the strategy shifts from just being a clever tax maneuver to a meaningful quality of life upgrade. These are incredibly tangible benefits. Day one access includes $0 virtual urgent care, and we're talking about connecting to a doctor in an average of 9 minutes.
That's faster than driving to a clinic.
Much faster.
Yeah.
It also includes $0 mental health counseling available 24/7.
When you say $0, do you mean there's a $0 copay, but I still have to hit my deductible first?
No, I mean $0 out of pocket, period.
Yeah.
It bypasses the deductible entirely.
Oh, wow.
It also includes over 800 fully covered $0 generic prescriptions. So if a diabetic employee needs metformin or someone needs a standard antibiotic, they walk into the local pharmacy, show their card, and the cost is $0. Plus, it includes massive discounts on dental, vision, lab tests at 60% off, and imaging like MRIs at 75% off. And it includes family coverage.
Okay, so the employee gets more take-home pay, and they suddenly have a doctor in their pocket for free.
Right.
It still feels like a trick, I have to be honest. Are employees forced into this? What if someone just doesn't want to mess with their paycheck?
Participation is 100% voluntary. If an employee looks at the math, talks to their spouse, and decides they don't want to participate, they simply opt out. Nothing changes for them. Their paycheck stays exactly the same as it was, down to the penny.
And if they do opt in, can they change their mind next month?
No. If they elect to participate, their elections are locked for the plan year.
Mm.
You can't just jump in and out month to month depending on whether you feel sick. The IRS is very strict about this.
So you're locked in.
Right. The only way to change an election mid-year is if you experience an IRS-recognized qualifying life event.
What counts as a qualifying life event?
Marriage, divorce, the birth or adoption of a child, or a spouse losing their health coverage. Those specific events trigger a legal window to make a change. Otherwise, you are locked in for the 12-month cycle.
What about the actual W-2 document they get in January? If I'm an employee who uses TurboTax, is this going to make doing my taxes a total nightmare?
Not at all. The W-2 reflects the exact savings we just talked about cleanly. Box 1, which represents your federal taxable wages, is reduced. Box 3, your Social Security wages, and Box 5, your Medicare wages, are reduced.
Okay.
The total amount you elected to redirect pre-tax is typically noted down in Box 14, often labeled as S-125 or CAF-125. It's incredibly clean and requires no extra forms for the employee to file.
What if they quit? What if they leave the company halfway through the year? Does this portability exist, or are they cut off?
If they leave the company, their participation ends, just like standard group health insurance rules. The benefits stop when employment stops, barring any standard continuation rights that might apply. It is an employer-sponsored plan.
I promise to ask the hard questions today. You've given me the employer win and the employee win. Is there any trade-off for the employee? Any downside at all to lowering your taxable wage base?
In the spirit of total transparency, there's one minor trade-off, and it really only affects a specific demographic,
Okay.
because the plan reduces Social Security wages, which is Box 3 on the W-2 high earners who are near the Social Security wage cap, might see a marginally lower Social Security earnings record for that specific year.
So the retirement calculation might shift a tiny bit.
Slightly, yes.
Sure.
For the vast majority of the workforce, the immediate monthly cash flow increase of $70 or $80, plus the thousands of dollars in healthcare access, vastly outweigh a fractional change to a future retirement calculation 3 decades from now. But mathematically, it is a factual trade-off that exists.
I appreciate that transparency. It's a calculated decision. But for someone living paycheck to paycheck, cash today and free doctors today is usually the priority.
Exactly.
Okay, let's look at this from another angle. So employees win and employers win. But most mid-market and large companies aren't flying blind. They already have health insurance brokers. They already have major medical plans from Blue Cross, Aetna, Humana, United.
Sure do.
How does this fit into the existing healthcare stack? Does a Section 125 plan replace their health insurance?
That is probably the most common misconception among employers when they first hear about this. A Section 125 cafeteria plan, specifically the way Benecor models it with their integrated benefits, does not replace major medical insurance.
It doesn't replace it, so you still need the big, expensive plan.
Yes. It sits alongside the existing coverage. It layers on top of it. Employees keep their major medical networks. They keep their current primary care doctors. They keep their Blue Cross or Aetna cards right in their wallet.
But if I already have Blue Cross, why do I need Benecor's virtual care and pharmacy benefits? Why do I need both?
Because of what we call the access problem in American healthcare.
The access problem.
Yeah. Having a traditional insurance card solves the catastrophic problem. If you get into a car accident and need bypass surgery, the insurance kicks in to save you from bankruptcy. But traditional plans have massive deductibles now. An average employee might have a $4,000 or $5,000 deductible.
Right, so you're paying out of pocket until you hit that threshold.
Which means if their kid gets an ear infection at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday, they don't want to go to the ER or urgent care because they'll get hit with a $250 facility bill they have to pay out of pocket since they haven't met their deductible.
That happens all the time.
So what happens? They just don't get care. They wait it out, the kid gets sicker, the parent misses work. They have an insurance card, but they don't have access to health care.
Oh, I see. So the Benecor layer steps in for the day-to-day stuff to bridge that gap.
Exactly. The employee uses the Benecor $0 virtual urgent care to get diagnosed in 9 minutes. They get the antibiotic prescriptions into their pharmacy, and then they pick up that generic drug for $0. The major medical plan is still there for the big stuff, the surgeries, the hospitalizations. But the Section 125 benefits actually provide the day-to-day access without triggering the major medical deductible.
So what does this all mean for the broker? If I'm a benefits broker listening to this, my immediate fear is that Benecor is a competitor. Are they trying to backdoor my client, sell them a new benefit, and steal my book of business?
Absolutely not. Benecor acts purely as the administrator. Brokers actually get appointed to sell the Benecor platform to their own clients.
So the broker brings this to the CFO as a tool.
Yes. Think about the defensive power of this tool for a broker. Historically, a broker walks into a renewal meeting and has to deliver terrible news. They say, your rates went up 12%, I shopped the market, and this is the best I can do. You have to eat the cost or cut coverage.
The broker is the bearer of bad news, and they risk getting fired by the CFO.
Right. But with this, the broker introduces the Section 125 plan alongside the renewal. They say, your rates went up 12%, but I am bringing you a payroll tax strategy where the FICA recapture pays for the entire premium increase. Oh, and by the way, your employees get an upgrade in day-to-day benefits, and their take-home pay goes up.
So the broker gets to play hero instead of the Grim Reaper?
Precisely. It locks in the broker's relationship with the client because they just solved the CFO's biggest budget crisis at zero net cost. It layers perfectly into their existing book of business.
Okay, the broker gets to leave the building after the contract is signed looking like a genius. But the HR director is the one stuck holding the bag when 500 employees have questions.
Yep, the implementation phase.
Right, because whenever someone says new company-wide benefit rollout, HR hears hundreds of hours of answering confused employee questions and fixing payroll glitches. Let's talk implementation. What does the fallout look like for them? What is the actual playbook?
The first thing HR needs to hear to lower their blood pressure is what stays exactly the same.
Okay.
When you implement this, you do not change your payroll provider.
Yeah.
You do not change your existing health carrier. You do not restructure your HR team. And you do not change your standard open enrollment calendar for your major medical. There is no ripping out of existing software.
Okay, deep breath for HR. So what is the actual timeline to launch this? Because it sounds complicated.
It is a highly structured 6-week playbook. Days 1 through 7 are cure data. The agreement is signed, Benecor securely collects the payroll data from the existing system, and they run an eligibility analysis. They look at the wage bands, the tax brackets, and the demographics. HR just reviews the list of who is eligible.
And then, what happens next?
Days 8 through 37 are the communication phase. This is arguably the most critical part because, as you mentioned earlier, people are terrified of their paychecks changing.
Absolutely.
If an employee sees a new deduction code they don't understand, HR's phone rings off the hook. So Benecor runs a 30-day personalized employee communication campaign. They send the texts, the emails, and they provide side-by-side paycheck math so every individual employee can see exactly how their specific take-home pay will increase.
They show them the actual math before they sign up.
Yes,
Yeah.
down to the penny based on their wage.
And what happens in the final weeks?
Days 35 to 40 are for payroll setup. Benecor assists with entering the deduction codes into the employer's existing payroll system, and they run mock testing to make sure the math is reducing the taxable wages correctly before a single real dollar moves. Then on day 42, you go live.
I represent HR right now, and I have to say, zero admin burden is the biggest lie in corporate America. Every software vendor says it. None of them actually mean it.
That's fair.
When John in the warehouse forgets his password to the virtual doctor app, or when Maria is confused by the new deduction code on her pay stub who actually answers the phone, won't HR just be swamped with troubleshooting?
I completely validate that skepticism, because 9 times out of 10, HR does get stuck with the busy work. But this is where Benecor's structure is fundamentally different from a standard software vendor. Benecor actually owns the post-enrollment experience. They built the member services infrastructure.
So the employee calls Benecor, not HR?
Correct. If an employee needs help navigating the telehealth app, or has a question about a prescription, or doesn't understand their pay stub, they contact Benecor member services directly. Furthermore, Benecor runs multilingual enrollment.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Depending on the workforce, they have teams that handle Spanish, Somali, Sichuan, and other languages.
That's actually a massive liability shield. I mean, if you think about a manufacturing plant.
Exactly. HR doesn't have to translate complex tax law into HMON. Benecor handles the communication in the employee's native language, ensuring true informed consent. HR does not have to chase answers or act as an IT help desk.
Okay, HR is breathing a little easier now, but the compliance officer has just entered the chat and they are holding a massive clipboard.
The fun part.
Right. What happens when the IRS comes knocking? I want to talk about audit armor, because messing with payroll taxes feels like kicking a hornet's nest.
Compliance is the entire ballgame. If an attractive benefit plan fails an IRS audit, it costs the employer vastly more in penalties than having no plan at all. There is a golden rule of Section 125, and it is absolute.
What is it?
The written plan document, the adoption agreement, and the summary plan description, the SPD, must be signed and dated before the first pre-tax payroll runs.
Hold on, define SPD for us. What is a summary plan description?
It's essentially the plain English rulebook that must be given to every employee. It outlines what benefits are offered, how claims are made, what the eligibility rules are, and what happens if the plan is terminated. ERISA requires that every participant receives this so they know their rights.
Okay, so the documents have to be signed before you run payroll. What happens if they aren't? What if a company gets excited, starts doing the pre-tax deductions to save money immediately, and then says, well, we'll have the lawyers write the document next month?
If the document isn't signed and dated beforehand, the IRS can and will retroactively disallow the pre-tax treatment.
Oh.
Meaning the IRS will say, That wasn't a valid Section 125 plan. Suddenly, the employer owes back taxes on all that FICA they thought they saved.
Hmm.
The employee owes back taxes on the income, plus severe interest and penalties. It is a catastrophic financial event.
That is
It
terrifying.
is, which is why compliance cannot be an afterthought. But the initial document is just the starting line. Once the plan is running, there is non-discrimination testing, or NDT. Yes. The IRS requires 3 mandatory annual tests: the eligibility test, the contributions and benefits test, and the key employee concentration test.
What are those tests actually looking for? Give me an example of what would fail.
They ensure that executives, owners, and highly compensated employees aren't getting disproportionate tax breaks compared to rank-and-file workers. For example, the key employee concentration test requires that key employees like the CEO or major shareholders do not receive more than 25% of the total non-taxable benefits provided under the plan.
Okay, so if the executives are hoarding all the tax advantages and the warehouse workers aren't participating,
Then the plan fails the test, and the executives lose their tax advantage status.
who manages that? Does the CFO have to run those tests manually on a spreadsheet?
No, Benecor handles the testing, and their backing is formidable. The programs are reviewed and supported by highly experienced tax, legal, and compliance professionals. For instance, their plans are reviewed quarterly by CBIZ Advisors, which is a top 7 U.S. accounting firm, and the legal framework is drafted by Heitzman Law, a firm with over 35 years of deep ERISA expertise.
Let me push back here. I can go online right now, Google Section 125 Plan Document Template, and buy a PDF for 99 bucks. I can download it instantly.
You certainly can.
Why shouldn't a scrappy CFO just buy a cheap template, sign it, hand it to payroll, and run this themselves to avoid the $35 monthly fee?
We see companies try this all the time, and it is almost always a disaster. What's fascinating here is that a cheap PDF template is dormant by month 4.
Why dormant?
Because a PDF doesn't execute anything. A PDF doesn't integrate with your payroll system. A PDF doesn't capture and securely store the individual salary reduction agreements for your staff. A PDF doesn't automatically run the 3 annual NDT tests. And crucially, it doesn't substantiate the Section 213 medical expenses to ensure the benefits being delivered are actually tax-free.
Hold on, you threw out Section 213. For those of us who don't read IRS tax codes on the weekends, what exactly counts as a 213D medical expense?
Section 213 of the IRS Code defines what constitutes legitimate medical care. It includes amounts paid for the diagnosis, cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of disease.
Oh.
That's why generic medications, virtual urgent care, and mental health counseling qualify. A gym membership or generic dietary supplement usually does not. If you don't substantiate that the pre-tax money is paying for a true 213D expense, the IRS will classify it as taxable income.
So a PDF template fails because it's static. It's like buying a gym membership and expecting to get fit without actually lifting the weights. You have the paperwork, but you aren't running the compliance muscles, the non-discrimination testing, the daily payroll integration, the 213D substantiation.
Exactly. When the IRS audits a company, they don't just ask to see a plan document. They ask for the signed SPDs, the individual election forms, the payroll registers, and the NDT results. If you bought a $5 document and didn't test it, you owe the back taxes plus penalties. With an administrator like Benecor, compliance is the product. You are paying for the audit defense just as much as the FICA recapture.
Speaking of audits in the IRS, there was a lot of noise recently about a 2023 IRS Inspector General memorandum regarding wellness plans. I've heard some CFOs say, wait, didn't the IRS crack down on this entire industry?
Oh yes, that memo.
Can you explain what people misunderstand about that memo? Because it caused a lot of panic.
Yes, that 2023 memo is incredibly important, and it is frequently misinterpreted by people who only read the headlines.
Yeah.
What the IRS cracked down on were improperly structured wellness programs that were essentially just paying employees cash rewards without taxing them. The IRS clarified the rigid difference between taxable rewards and legitimate healthcare benefits.
Construct a hypothetical for me. Give me an example of the wrong way to do it, the kind of sham plan the IRS was targeting.
The wrong way is an employer deducting $1,000 pre-tax from an employee's paycheck and then turning around and giving that exact employee a $1,000 cash wellness reward back in their same paycheck.
Just moving the money in a circle.
Exactly. But they were claiming that cash reward is tax-free just because the employee called a toll-free health hotline or watched a video on eating apples.
Seriously?
Yes. The IRS said unequivocally if you give an employee a cash reward or a cash equivalent indemnity payout, it is taxable gross income. You can't just wash money through a fake wellness plan to avoid taxes. It's called cash washing, and it's illegal.
Okay, so how does a properly structured program like Benecor's address this without triggering an IRS audit?
A compliant program understands and embraces the fact that any cash reward or wellness indemnity payout must be treated as taxable income. Properly structured programs ensure that any post-tax wellness reward is fully taxed on the payroll ledger. They don't
Yeah.
hide it,
Ah, so they tax the reward.
right? They run the complex math to ensure that the employee still sees a net increase in their take-home pay, based purely on the fundamental Section 125 taxable wage reduction, while fully complying with the requirement that the cash equivalent rewards are taxed.
So the math still works out positive for the employee even after paying the tax on the reward.
Yes. Furthermore, the core value of a legitimate plan relies on delivering actual Section 213T medical benefits, like the virtual urgent care, the mental health counseling, the actual prescriptions, which are legally tax-advantaged. The 2023 IRS memo was a severe warning against sham cash washing schemes. It did not invalidate legitimate Section 125 cafeteria plans or legitimate medical expense reimbursements.
Got it. So the rule is you can't fake a medical expense to hand out tax-free cash. You actually have to provide real health care. And if you provide a cash reward on top of that, it gets taxed appropriately.
That's the perfect summary. And that is why having top-tier accounting and ERISA legal support is mandatory, not optional. You cannot play games with the IRS.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. Let's bring this down to the ground level. We know the federal rules are rigid, but America is a patchwork of state tax codes. How does this look in different regions? Does this work if I'm not in a specific state?
It works in all 50 states, but the state-level tax nuances make it incredibly lucrative in certain regions. Because most states use the federal adjusted gross income as their starting point for calculating state taxes, when Section 125 reduces your federal taxable wages, it automatically reduces your state taxable wages too.
Let's look at some examples. What about a state like North Carolina?
North Carolina has a flat income tax, currently around 4.5% and scheduled to decline over the next few years. If you are a financial analyst in Charlotte, a Section 125 plan saves you money on your federal income tax, your FICA tax, and your North Carolina state tax. It's a three-layer savings. Every dollar you elect pre-tax dodges all three taxes simultaneously.
What about Illinois?
Very similar. Illinois has a 4.95% flat tax. So a logistics worker in Chicago gets the federal, the FICA, and the 4.95% state savings. It makes a huge difference in their monthly take-home pay.
But what about local city taxes? I know some municipalities are notoriously aggressive.
This is where Ohio becomes the ultimate example of tax efficiency.
Ohio.
Yeah, Ohio has a highly complex local tax system. If you run a proper Section 125 plan in Ohio, the pre-tax election reduces the federal tax, the state tax, the city income tax, for example. Cleveland has a 2.5% city tax, and it can reduce the local school district tax.
Wow.
You are literally achieving 4 layers of tax savings from a single payroll deduction code. The per-dollar take-home improvement for an Ohio employee is among the highest in the entire country.
That's incredible. 4 layers of tax on a single dollar just vanishing legally. Let's pivot from geography to industries. Are there specific types of businesses where this FICA recapture is particularly massive?
Yes. The hospitality industry, specifically restaurants, sees an unbelievable ROI.
Wait, I have to ask about tipped workers. Restaurants rely heavily on the Section 45B FICA tip credit. If a restaurant implements a Section 125 plan to lower their wage base, does it mess up their tip credit? Because if it does, no restaurant GM will touch this.
It's a great question, and it's usually the first fear a restaurant owner has. Let's explain what 45B is. The IRS allows restaurants to claim a business tax credit for the employer's portion of FICA taxes paid on employee tips.
Right.
So if an employer runs a Section 125 plan, does it cannibalize that credit? The answer is no, it does not conflict at all.
Why not?
Because the Section 125 plan operates entirely on the wage component of the paycheck, the hourly rate. The Section 45B tip credit runs on a tip income. They run on completely separate calculation tracks simultaneously.
Oh, that is huge for them.
It is. A massive restaurant chain can preserve their entire tip credit while recapturing 7.65% FICA on the wage side. It is a multi-million-dollar win for large hospitality chains.
What about industries with high turnover? Say, a company where people are constantly coming and going. Does the administrative burden outweigh the tax savings?
Home care agencies and nursing homes are actually prime candidates for this. These are highly diverse hourly workforces. The profit margins for the agency are incredibly tight, and turnover is brutal. You are constantly losing staff to a competitor down the street offering 50 cents more an hour.
So how does this fix turnover?
If you're a home health aide making $32,000 a year, an extra $70 in your take-home pay every month is life-changing. It pays a utility bill. Plus, you get $0 generic meds and virtual primary care, which you likely didn't have before.
That's a huge lifestyle upgrade.
Right. For the agency owner, they recapture massive FICA savings across hundreds of hourly workers, but more importantly, they see a massive retention boost because their workforce finally feels like they're making a livable wage with real, accessible benefits. They don't leave for 50 cents more an hour when they know they'll lose their free doctor access.
Are there any ownership structures that can't do this? What if I'm a small business owner and I operate as an S Corp? Can I participate?
S-Corp have a specific, rigid rule. Shareholders who own more than 2% of an S-Corp cannot participate in a Section 125 plan personally. The IRS strictly prohibits it because they don't want owners abusing the tax shield.
So if the owner can't participate, they shouldn't bother setting one up to the company.
No, they absolutely should set one up. They can't participate personally, but they can and should sponsor a plan to recapture the FICA taxes on all of their W-2 staff. The owner still gets the bottom line financial benefit of the FICA recapture flowing back into their business account, even if they can't personally use the $0 virtual care app.
Wow. Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground today. Let's pull it all together so we don't lose the forest for the trees. Section 125 is a statute that has been sitting in the IRS code since 1978. When it is administered correctly by a specialized compliant platform like Benecor Health, it legally redirects the FICA taxes an employer is already paying. It turns that tax liability into meaningful healthcare access for employees like $0 virtual care and $0 prescriptions, while simultaneously increasing the employee's net take-home pay by lowering their taxable wage base.
Right.
And it does all of this while returning net positive cash flow to the employer's operating account.
And crucially, it doesn't replace major medical insurance. It sits right beside it to make day-to-day healthcare actually affordable. It bridges the deductible gap.
Right. It is a mathematical win for the CFO, the HR director, the benefits broker, and the W-2 worker.
It is. And I'd leave you with this final thought to mull over. We spent the last hour talking about a tax code from 1978. It makes you wonder how much of the modern healthcare crisis isn't actually a lack of resources, but simply a failure to efficiently route the money that is already moving through our economy.
That's a great point.
The friction isn't the law. The law allows this. The friction is the administration. It forces you to ask what other efficiencies are sitting dormant in your payroll right now, just waiting for the right operational expertise to unlock them.
That is the perfect question to end on. Thank you to everyone for joining us on this deep dive. I highly encourage you to pull up your own pay stub, or if you're a business owner, look at your corporate ledger with a fresh set of eyes. Because as we've learned today, sometimes the X-ray machine isn't broken. You just needed someone who knows how to read the film. We'll see you next time.